the Denver Broncos, our Denver Broncos offseason preview. They're going to have 30 free agents. These are the most notable ones. Von Miller, he has a club option, so the team can bring him back or not. Justin Simmons, Kareem Jackson, Shelby Harris, DeMar Dotson, Tim Patrick, Philip Lindsay, DeMarcus Walker, Alexander Johnson, Jeremiah Tachu, and Elijah Wilkinson. In my opinion, they have to bring back Justin Simmons. Kareem Jackson, I'm iffy on. I would love to bring him back at the right price. You absolutely have to make it a priority to bring back Shelby Harris. I think Tim Patrick, you kind of bring him back too because he slotted in that wide receiver number 2 role and number 1 role at times. Philip Lindsay, not a must bring back guy, but it would help. It would help out your running back depth. If he doesn't get paid too much, you do bring him back. And Elijah Wilkinson, I think they will bring him back because they have said that DeMar Dotson is not going to be the future tackle, and Vic Fangio has said that they're going to stick with Elijah Wilkinson. So I do think he'll be back. Jawan James is going to be healthy next season too, so that's going to help. But ultimately, I think you bring back Justin Simmons, Kareem Jackson, Shelby Harris, Tim Patrick, and Elijah Wilkinson. Von Miller is set to make $22 million a year. I'm not sure the team brings him back. If they were to negotiate a contract for much less, maybe $10 million, I'd be all for it. But at $22 million a year at Von Miller's age and with the injury history that he has, I wouldn't bring him back.
Yeah, same thing. Unless they can restructure Von Miller's deal, I would likely cut ties with him. I just don't it depends on who you ask, but personally, I don't think the Broncos are in a position right now to have a guy like Von Miller on the roster. He should be on a win-now team, getting older with that big contract, and I think the Broncos are more in a state of youth, developing youth and getting better, because with a team like the Chiefs in that division, and also the Chargers, I think are going to get a lot better and take a leap next year. And the Raiders are always a 50-50 type team. You know, they show signs early in the season, and then the last 2 years they've kind of shut down late. But I just don't think the Broncos are in a position to be going for it right now. So I do think one guy they should get rid of immediately is Von Miller, unless they could restructure him down to a lower deal, which I think is a possibility. But guys I would bring back, I would 100% bring back Justin Simmons, one of the better safeties in the league. I would definitely bring him back. Elijah Wilkinson on the offensive line. You know, I think they have a couple of other positions they have to figure out there, but Elijah Wilkinson is one guy I would bring back. I would consider bringing back Mike Purcell, maybe even a guy like Derek Wolfe. But outside of that, I don't think there are many guys that I would bring back.
So the Broncos can free up to $23 million in cap space if they were to cut A.J. Bouye and Jarrell Casey. I think that they do. I think A.J. Bouye is gone from the Broncos. He hasn't lived up to expectations with them when he signed there, when he got traded. It was one of those, I forgot which one. I think it was a trade, but he hasn't lived up to expectations. And Jarrell Casey, I had high expectations for him coming into Denver this past season, but he got hurt, and they have some good defensive linemen right now. Draymond Jones was huge for them last year. Deshaun Williams is pretty good. And Mike Purcell I think is a really good, serviceable guy. So I don't think there's any reason for Jarrell Casey to be kept. The Denver Broncos are projected to have $55 million in cap space, and I think their positions of need are edge rusher, inside linebacker, cornerback, and, of course, quarterback. My free agent targets for them would be William Jackson III. He was very good with Cincinnati this past season. And a guy who Buffalo may not be able to retain is Matt Milano. If Matt Milano were to go to Denver in Vic Fangio's defense, he would have a lot of success because he can not only blitz, he's a great tackler, but he can also cover tight ends and some wide receivers and running backs out of the backfield. Getting Matt Milano would be huge. If they don't bring back Kareem Jackson, a guy they could bring in would be Marcus May. Marcus May is a guy they could bring in. Troy Hill, he knows that defense. He could be brought in from the Rams. And at quarterback, you got guys like Jacoby Brissett if you want a viable starting quarterback who We know he's a game manager, but Jacoby Brissett can do some things with that offense, having Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Noah Fant, and KJ Hamler, who's a speedster, who I'm really high on. And then you got a guy like Ryan Fitzpatrick as well you can maybe bring in. And, of course, in the draft, I think they should draft Trey Lance. But I think if you can't, in free agency, you should try to sign a guy like Jacoby Brissett or Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, I kind of had the same thinking as you. I don't think they should go out and make a big splash at quarterback. Some people mentioned them in the Deshaun Watson conversation, Matthew Stafford, but I don't think they should be in on one of those guys. Maybe even a guy like Andy Dalton would be a veteran free agent signing and quarterback that they could make to bring in and just give Drew Lock a push, because I still have some belief in Drew Lock. It's kind of funny because at the start of the year, I was the one saying everybody was so sold on Drew Lock when he hadn't really showed you much yet. But now I feel like so many people have turned on Drew Lock because the big flashy names like Deshaun Watson and Matthew Stafford have come up. I think they should give Drew Lock another chance. Let him see if he could succeed a little bit with a healthier team. I like their receiver core, and if they could bring in a couple guys in the offensive line and shore up that offense, I'd like to see what Drew Lock can do for a season. Especially, I know they hit a couple of roadblocks this year with injuries and stuff like that. But I don't think they need to do anything more than you mentioned Jacoby Brissett, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Andy Dalton. I think one of those guys would be good to come in and give him a push. Another guy that you mentioned that I love, I had written down Marcus May. He was incredible for the Jets this year. He was really the only guy in the secondary that was viable, and I think that he would be a huge addition for. As much as I love it, I hate it as a Jet fan because I think every team should be out on him. He would be a great addition anywhere he goes, and he would be a nice replacement in the secondary for a couple guys I think they could cut in that secondary.
See, I personally feel like the Broncos don't need to go out and get offensive linemen because they have Garrett Bowles, who was one of the best tackles in the league this past season, Dalton Risner, who's still a young player, only in his second season, about to be in his third, Lloyd Cushenberry, who's coming off of his rookie year, who I'm really high on out of LSU, Graham Glasgow, who was a solid starter for the Lions, and Jawan James. Jawan James is not a bad offensive tackle. I don't think they should really be hell-bent on bringing in offensive linemen, maybe just depth guys, but not any splash big moves. But another guy at safety, at strong safety, could be Keanu Neil. Keanu Neil has had an injury history, and because of that, he's not going to command much money in free agency. But Keanu Neil, when he has been healthy, he has been a Pro Bowl caliber player, and he can play in the box. He can play strong safety. He can cover sometimes. He's a great cat tackler. He's great against the run. Keanu Neil could be a name to monitor because he's not going to ask for much money. And then you look at the edge positions. If Von Miller decides to go, you need to bring in a guy outside of Bradley Chubb to rush the passer. That could be Matt Judon or Melvin Ingram or maybe a Shaq Barrett, Leonard Floyd type of guy, Hassan Reddick. Leonard Williams is another name. But I ultimately feel like Von Miller will stay loyal to Denver, and Denver will try to restructure a deal with him. And because of that, I don't really see Von Miller leaving Denver because as long as I've been watching football, Von Miller has been the face of Denver's defense. So I don't think they move on from him. But moving into the draft, they have the 9th overall pick in this draft, and I think there are 3 guys that stand out to me in this draft that they have to get. If Trey Lance is at the 9th pick, you get him. You get him 100%. And I'd even vouch for trading up to get Trey Lance because they need that franchise quarterback. And also, I just remember what you said. Every team should be in on Deshaun Watson. Even the Broncos. I don't care what the situation is. Everybody should be in on Deshaun Watson. But I think with the 9th overall pick, there is a chance that Trey Lance does slide there. But if not, I would trade up and get Trey Lance or Zach Wilson, Justin Fields type of a quarterback. I would trade up and get those guys. And then let's say Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, and Trey Lance are all gone. I'd go with Caleb Farley or Patrick Surtain II. I think they need a cornerback bad, and this draft has a lot of pretty good cornerbacks. So if it's not a quarterback, I'd go cornerback. If it's not quarterback, I'd go cornerback all day. Caleb Farley or Patrick Surtain II. I'd probably lean towards Caleb Farley.
I'm going to kind of contradict myself here because I just said that I would give Drew Lock another chance this season because I still think he has potential. And I don't think he's gotten the most fair shake, but I know a lot of Broncos fans want to see them draft a quarterback, and I know it's been rumbling around like you said, if Trey Lance is there when they're drafting, I think that's a can't miss. And he's a guy that could sit behind Drew Lock maybe for a year and get that NFL experience because he's thought to be more of a project than the guys at the top. But if they were going to draft a quarterback and Trey Lance isn't there when they're picking, I guess that wouldn't really make sense with what I'm about to say. But I would trade up and maybe look at getting a guy like Justin Fields or Zach Wilson, depending on which one of them falls out of the top 4, because I don't think the Dolphins are going to draft a quarterback. So if you could trade up to 4 maybe with the Falcons, I think that's a viable option. But you said it. If it's not quarterback, it's cornerback, and there are 3 pretty good options on the board. Caleb Farley, Patrick Surtain, and J.C. Horn are all top cornerback guys. I mean, I've talked about him for a couple teams now, and I think at that pick, it will be a solid pick. That's one of their biggest holes this offseason, so I would go there if I'm not going quarterback.
For the later rounds, if they want to shore up that tackle position because they're not hell-bent on keeping Jawan James there for long, I think Walker Little would be a good option, Alex Leatherwood. And at cornerback, if they're not able to get Caleb Farley or Patrick Surtain with that 9th pick, if they do, in fact, get Trey Lance, I think some good second-round cornerbacks that can probably fall to them would be Tyson Campbell, Asante Samuel Jr., and I think those are some good options. Maybe Sean Wade if they want to take him that high. But with the later picks, I think these are 2 guys that Denver could take a chance on. With the 3rd or 4th rounder, take a chance on Jamie Newman. I'm really going to vouch for Jamie Newman a lot. Jamie Newman has all the physical tools to be a great NFL quarterback. Not just a good quarterback, a great NFL quarterback. Him opting out of playing for Georgia this past season really hurt his draft stock. Because of that, he's probably going to go to a better team, and he has all the tools to be very successful in the NFL. So if the Broncos could get him with the later round pick, I'd get Jamie Newman. And another guy, Andre Sisco, safety out of Syracuse. He's lightning fast. He got injured in 2020. That's going to hurt his draft stock. They could possibly have a first round. They could possibly have a draft of Trey Lance, then getting Asante Samuel Jr., Tyson Campbell, or Sean Wade. Then in the later rounds, getting Andre Sisco and Jamie Newman. That would be a home run draft for the Denver Broncos if they were not to get if they don't get Trey Lance with that 9th overall pick, or if they don't trade up for him. That could be a hell of a draft for them. Getting a guy like Caleb Farley, Patrick Surtain II, along with another cornerback or tackle, whatever it may be. I think the Broncos have a lot of options in this draft, and luckily for them, this draft is filled with positions that they need.
Yeah, and if they don't go quarterback in the first round, I think they should look at drafting a quarterback later on. I think maybe a guy like Mac Jones could fall to them in the 2nd round, or Kyle Trask out of Florida. If you want to even go later, maybe a Kellen Mond would be a solid option. He did great at the Senior Bowl. And then also offensive line, I think they should look at some guys later on. But I do think that first round pick is the one that's going to be the most important, and it's going to depend. It's going to draw the roadmap for where they go the rest of the draft, because if they go quarterback, obviously that changes what they do the rest of the way. And I also think they could either they're one of the weird teams that could either trade up, they could trade back, they could draft at their pick, and no matter what they do, it's going to send shockwaves throughout the rest of their draft. But I do ultimately think they end up going quarterback, and I do think it's going to be Trey Lance in round 1.